There are 10 common reasons I've heard for why people don't read European comics. And they're all wrong, and I'm going to tell you why today. This is the Pipeline Comics Podcast. Hi, I'm Augie DeBleek Jr., host of the Pipeline Comics Podcast and sole proprietor of PipelineComics.com, home of hundreds of Franco-Belgian comic book reviews. And today I have a top 10 list for you because everybody loves a listicle. It's the 10 reasons people tell me they don't read European comics, and my response as for why they're wrong. Let's get right to it. Number 1, I can't read French. I've got good news for you. I can't read French either. And while that means there's an awful lot of books we can't read, and we could be frustrated by that, a better response is there are lots of books we can now read that are available in English, and you can find them in lots of places, and we'll discuss those as the weeks go by. But let's put it this way. Digital comics is filled with translated European comics. Go to Comixology or isneo.com, and you'll find them there. They are great. And if you find you like them that much and want to read some of the ones that aren't translated, it's a bit of work, but you can type a lot of stuff into Google Translate and figure it out. I've done that before. It's not pretty. It takes a while. But for the purposes of this list, you can read lots of French comics in English today, digitally, and some in print as well. Number 2, speaking of print comics, I hear that nobody publishes these comics in print in English in North America. And to that I can only say, wow, no, Cinebook, Fantagraphics, Image Comics, First Second, Oni Press through their magnetic press line, Humanoids, Dynamite, NBM, Paper Cuts, IDW. There's a whole new publisher called The Blaze. They're all printing. Oh, and Titan. Titan AE. No, not Titan AE is a Disney movie. The Titan publisher people over in Great Britain. Close enough. They distribute their stuff through North America, as does Cinebook. All of those people print on paper actual European comics translated into English. It's obviously going to be a little more expensive than the digital versions, but they're out there. Number 3, the pages are too big. Well, obviously it doesn't matter if you're a digital reader, but if you're a print reader, well, there's good news and bad news there. The bad news is sometimes they're not too big. Sometimes the publisher shrinks the pages down, which, in my opinion, is an absolute abomination. DC Comics actually once held the license for Humanoids or for European comics of some sort, and they did publish some Francois Skyton books, and the first thing they did was shrink them to standard comic book size, and the results were god-awful. I almost wish I had bought one of those books just so I could scan them in and show you the results and how bad they are. Not only did pages look awful when they're shrunk down that small, but somewhere in the process, the fidelity of the line was compromised. Maybe it was a digital scanning or something that was done. It just did not work, and it looked horrible. And that's probably why that DC line of comics didn't last that long. But if you're talking about just the album format, which is the most popular format in Europe for these kinds of books, 48 pages, and the pages are, I don't know the exact size, 10 inches by 12 inches, whatever size it is. It's a little bit taller, a little bit wider than North American comics, and they're glorious to read. They're only 48 pages, so they're not that thick. 48, 60, somewhere in there. They're not that thick at all. They're easy to hold in your hand, especially the hardcover editions. I'll grant you sometimes when the books are that skinny, paperback editions do feel a little bit more difficult to read and kind of spread open as you get to the middle of the book, but they're not that difficult to read. And if you're the type of person who has a bookshelf filled with artist edition books or absolute edition books from DC or some of the omnibus books, you really can't complain about European albums being too big. Number 4 in the list of complaints I've heard for why people don't read European comics, the books are too short. Okay, so now we've gone from the page size being too big to the books are too short. They're about 48 pages, sometimes going up to 60, maybe 70 once in a while, generally speaking. Sometimes when a publisher brings them over, they'll reprint 3 books in a series under one cover so that they can get sort of a better price point for them because it's a thicker book so they can charge a little more. It all works out. But if your complaint is that the books are too short, the stories are theoretically too short, no, that's not true at all. First of all, the books may only be 48 pages, but because they're bigger size pages, they put more art on them, they tell more story on them. There is sort of a general different kind of storytelling you see a little bit in some sections of the Franco-Belgian world, so it might be a little unfamiliar to you. It might feel different from a North American style of storytelling, which is more, 3-act structure, straight out of Hollywood type stuff. But you still get a lot of story in those 48 pages, and if you're reading the digital comics, often for a lower price. The point is, it doesn't take 6 books to get one story. There are some series which do have 2-issue or 2-album stories or 3-album stories, but they're really good at doing that whole satisfying chunk thing where each album feels complete unto its own. It may leave you on a cliffhanger. There may be obviously more story to come, but you're getting a lot of story, and it does feel like you've read a big chunk of story by the time you're done with each album. Number 5, the books are too expensive. The print books do cost a little more, but I think you're getting more value for the money. But if you're really concerned about that, go over to Comixology.com right now. You probably have an account there. Click on the sale tab at the top. Scroll down a little bit. Somewhere in there, you will find a sale or maybe 2 or 3 sales going on for European comics that will set each album price down to maybe as low as $1.99 or $2.99. I think $2.99 is probably the most common. But that's less than the price of this week's new Marvel or DC book. You're getting a complete story. It's twice as many pages. It's a lot more art. They don't have splash pages. It's going to take you longer to read them. You're going to get a more filling feeling out of reading these books than you will with your superhero comic, which you may breeze through in about 5 or 10 minutes. Number 6, European books are too hard to find. No, they're not. You have Amazon, you have Comixology. If you also want to go digitally, you have Izneo, izneo.com. You may not have the direct market, but, there are other places to buy these books, and they are out there. They are available. If you see a review of them online, they often have the links to where you can find them. I do that at pipelinecomics.com. That felt like a free plug, but it's okay. It's my website. It's my podcast. I can do that. Number 7 on the list. You don't know what's good. That's why I'm here. Let me help. Number 8. I've heard this one before. I tried this or that book, and I didn't like it. Okay. The good news is there are a lot more books out there for you to read. There is a wide swath of genres being represented in European comics. The number of different kinds of comics, and I reeled off a whole list of them back in the first episode of this podcast. Go back one in your feed there to find it. Is amazing. And I can just look at my bookshelf behind me right now and find, historical biographies and historical comedies and straight up comic adventures and kids adventures and horror and sci-fi and police procedural. And that's just looking at one bookshelf. Trust me, there's a whole lot of different stuff to read there. Again, it's not all superheroes, which all North American comics aren't either, but I find the people who are least likely to read these books are the ones who are least likely to read anything outside Marvel and DC, which may not be you, but when you look at the direct market and see it's like 80% Marvel and DC, you see where I'm arguing here from. Reason number 9, translations aren't very good. No, I disagree. I think they are these days. I think maybe once upon a time when these were more of a novel adventure that the translations were kind of done on the cheap and quickly, maybe too literally. But I think the translators they have working on these books these days, especially the ones that come out from Europe Comics, which is I don't know how to say it, the collective, I guess, of French publishers who banded together to release their books in English every month digitally. Their translators are doing a great job. And Anthea Bell, who we lost last year, sadly, who translated all but the most recent 1 or 2 Asterix books, is a legend in literary circles for her translation abilities. She was a grade A badass at translating. She one time wanted to translate a book from language she didn't know, so she spent the weekend learning the language. And she's the one who came up with very many of those puns and quips you might be familiar with if you've read a lot of those Asterix books. There are very great translators available for these books these days. Sometimes you're going to have to deal with the fact they speak British English instead of American English, but I can deal with that. And number 10, the 10th most common reason I hear from people for why they don't read European comics is that they don't have enough time. And to that, I can only answer, okay, yeah, you got me there. I can't help you. I can't rearrange your schedule. If you don't have enough time, it's sad, but it's true. You'd have to give up something you like right now to try something you're not sure you might not like. And I'm not here to be your your life coach. If you hear about something, though, that sounds exciting to you that you'd want to read, I think you'd find time for it. We all do. That's how all these things work. We get hooked and excited on one thing until something else catches our eye and seems more exciting or more interesting, and we make time for that, usually by getting rid of the old thing or pushing the old thing off to the side for a little bit. That's just life. I can't beat you on that one. Good for you.